Hello, my name is Jess Adamson. Welcome to the Breakthrough podcast, brought to you by Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation, Australia's only dedicated mental health research organisation. In this series, we'll be talking to courageous people who share their personal stories about their lived experience of mental health issues. We'll also be talking to researchers in the field to get an understanding of the how and why of mental illness. Mental illness is going to be the biggest health challenge in our lifetime. It consumes lives, it ruins lives, it takes lives. But it's time the question was answered. Why does it happen? And more importantly, how can we stop it? If you find anything spoken about in today's episode distressing, please contact Mental Health Emergency on 131465. Elise Thompson was 12 when she fell into the embrace of Rex, the name she gave to the insidious eating disorder anorexia that first wrapped her in comfort and then tried to squeeze the life out of her. She is passionate about the importance of better mental health research, and she works as a psychologist after gaining her qualifications at the University of Adelaide and the University of South Australia. Welcome to our podcast, Elise. I want to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself as a 12-year-old girl.
So as a 12-year-old, I was living with my family in Mount Gambier in the southeast of South Australia. And I was in year 8 at school, and I began to develop symptoms of anorexia at that time, after my mother had been diagnosed with an aggressive inflammatory breast cancer. That my way of coping with that was to restrict my food intake and lose weight.
What were the first signs? When you say that you started seeing the symptoms, what did you start to see?
So everything for me was going really well. I thought, great, I found this, new way to deal with all of the really hard things in life, and to deal with, the things that are uncomfortable and really tricky, and that is to lose weight. And if I just focus on that, then I don't need to, think about anything else. So I was really happy. However, my family started to notice, obviously, that my behaviours around food changed, and I was becoming more withdrawn, and I was losing weight, and they became pretty concerned.
You actually gave it a name, didn't you? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so my anorexia was called Rex, and it's Rex with a lowercase r because, that deserves to be capitalised. And he was the voice that I heard in my head. So probably around April of the year that I was in year 8, I became aware of this voice that I was hearing in my head, and he would get really angry at me if I, ate too much or didn't exercise enough, and he would really praise me and be really happy with me if I stuck to his plan as well. And it was quite a surreal experience.
Was it a terrible experience, or did you actually feel quite good about yourself for some of that time?
I felt really good about myself, initially, and I was being told by Rex that, this was making me into a better person, and I would be, thinner, and I'd be happier, and I'd be, a better family member, a better student, if I just, followed these plans. And of course, saying it now, it sounds ridiculous, but at the time that was my absolute reality. And so I started out, he made me feel really, really good. But then I sort of quickly realized that I wasn't going to be able to just, I guess, switch it off or not listen to him as easily as I thought that I would.
You've described it once before as like chasing a rainbow no one else can see. What did you mean by that?
There was always this sort of thought in my mind that if I just get to, this next goal weighted. If I just get to this next exercise goal or whatever, then I will be perfect, and then I will be happy and life will be good, and that will be fine. But the goalposts just moved further and further and further away, and I now know that I was never going to be happy, and it was never going to be, a case of just getting here and then everything was going to be perfect. So I likened it to, when you're trying to chase a rainbow, it obviously moves further and further away. However, in this case, I was the only one who could see the rainbow at all. And it looked really terrifying to all my family and friends.
We know that anorexia comes in many different kind of shapes and disguises. People experience it differently. For you, was it less eating and more exercise?
Yes, it was less eating and more exercise. And then it sort of changed over the 6 years that I was unwell. It sort of changed a bit to not keeping food down, and then, kind of fluctuated between, but basically, starving, exercising, purging.
So your family and friends around you obviously had some concerns. How did that play out? What did they do to try and help you?
I very clearly remember when my mother told me that she thought that I'd lost enough weight. So she sort of said, that's enough. And the feeling of sort of horror and shock that went through me at her saying that, and that's kind of the first time I realised, this is not something that I can just sort of stop. So my friends spoke to the school counsellor at my school, and she called my mum, and my mum took me to the doctor, and I started seeing a psychologist and a dietitian as well at that time.
What was that first GP appointment like?
I was sitting in the waiting room, convinced that she was going to tell me that I was overweight and that I weighed too much. I was absolutely terrified. I refused to be, so she didn't weigh me. I refused to be weighed. She didn't take blood pressure or any other measure of my health. And she just suggested that a multivitamin might help. So it was a great outcome for me, or for Rex. My parents were not so happy.
I can imagine. Looking back, that was a big missed opportunity, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was a really missed opportunity also for there to be collaboration, with her working with a GP with some sort of medical oversight, working with my psychologist and dietitian, who already working in a country area were pretty isolated themselves. So yeah, absolutely, that was a very missed opportunity.
After that, things progressed, didn't they? Can you paint a bit of a picture of, how long it went on for and what you experienced?
So I started seeing the psychologist and dietitian, and was treated with therapy and with learning about nutrition and things like that. And that went on for about a year. I saw them on an outpatient basis, and during that time, I would sort of gain weight in order, not because I wanted to or not because I thought that I had to, but in order to be able to do things like travel with my family, and also in order to get people to stop annoying me, basically. But it would never stick because it would never be, the right motivation, and I would always sort of invariably end up where I had started from. So after about, it was probably about a year and a half to 2 years of that, my psychologist and dietitian sort of said, this isn't working, and they referred me to a psychiatrist in Adelaide. So we went to see the psychiatrist who specialised in eating disorders and was, incredible. I remember seeing him and thinking, this is this guy really gets me, gets what's going on, knows what's happening, can see through all of the lies and all of the deception that comes with an eating disorder.
Because up until this point, you were outsmarting everybody, weren't you?
Yeah. I was very good at, I think, talking the talk. And I had quite a, I think that I had quite a good level of insight, but I just couldn't translate that into behaviour. And the deception, I think, for anyone with an eating disorder that sort of, comes across it is pretty incredible. And the things that you do to, avoid eating or to make it look like you've eaten or to, exercise in secret or things like that are pretty intense.
You must have been exhausted by this point with the ups and downs of it all. How pivotal was meeting that specialist?
Yeah, it was really amazing for my parents as well, because they could sort of, there was finally the specialist and he could sort of oversee things. He recommended a hospital stay. So I was admitted to hospital for 2 weeks in my last term of year 10. And that was a huge, I guess, sort of turning point for me and for my parents. And it was kind of like a bit of a wake-up call for me as well, realising that this couldn't go on forever, that I couldn't keep living like this. What
was going through your mind at that point, though? Because I'm guessing you didn't really want to go to hospital.
No. I remember going and asking how much time or when we'd be allowed to exercise, and the nurse just laughed at me. I was highly offended at that time. It was petrifying. It was the most petrifying experience of my life, I think. And I was so tired and so, sick of, on the one hand, I was so sick of living in this awful way, so tired mentally and physically. But on the other hand, I was so petrified about what giving up Rex would mean for me and what that life would look like.
Just having that control taken away from you.
Yeah, and having to deal with, meaning that something would happen and not having an automatic coping mechanism to fall back on. I was terrified.
So you're heading into hospital, and then how do you deal with the social side of that, telling your friends and I guess worrying about what other people were thinking?
Yeah, I didn't tell. I made my parents say, because also the thing is I thought that I had done a great job of hiding this, by that stage, nearly 3 years of illness. But of course I hadn't. And people knew. I made my parents tell people that I was going to Adelaide for a back injury or something nonsensical. And I was just, I was very adamant that no one would find out. But people did. And I guess, it was the end of the school year. My hospital admission was the end of the school year. So I knew I wasn't going to have to see people until the start of the next year. But it was kind of a really, I guess, surreal moment, there was some sort of celebration on at the end of the year for, moving into the senior school, and all my friends were there and I wasn't. I was 500 kilometres away in hospital.
Was it a positive stay? Did you learn from that experience?
I think it was. For the first time I met other people with eating disorders, and that was a pretty amazing experience because I wasn't the only one. I had sort of been feeling like I'm the only one who has these crazy thoughts and I'm the only one who feels this way. But I met other people, which was really great. But on the flip side of that, I met other people and I met, I've discovered other ways to hide things and to, be able to fool family members and sort of cheat the system. But I think on the whole it was a positive experience. But the recommendation following that admission was another longer admission for 6 weeks, which involved a month of complete bed rest. So no going to the toilet, no getting up and walking around, staying in the same room for 4 weeks.
That must have been an utter nightmare for you, thinking that there would be no exercise and so forth.
Yep. And just not going outside for a month, staying in the same room for a month was torturous. But it's kind of, I likened it to backing Rex into a corner, where you have to sort of, there was no opportunity for me to use the behaviours and use the strategies that I'd been using for so long and that were so damaging. So I had to, I guess, start to listen to my body and, let my body heal as well, and sit with it, not run away from that really uncomfortable feeling. So that was a big thing. And yeah, it's the hardest thing that I've done. Recovering from an eating disorder is the hardest thing that I've done in my life and the hardest thing that I hope that I will ever have to do. So yeah, it was a unique experience.
So you're dealing with that hospital stay. Your parents, I'm guessing you felt the strain of them having to be with you or try to be with you when they actually lived at Mount Gambier. But looking back, do you see that hospital stay as a real turning point?
It was good for my physical health. So it restored, it quickly restored physical health, which was really important. And yeah, I did after that hospital stay, I was able to, I went back to the term 2 of year 11, and I did really well. And in term 4 of that, and I, continued, we came up to Adelaide once a fortnight, weekly at some points for appointments. And I was able to go on exchange to Japan for the last term of year 11. So I did a 3-month exchange, which was a very big goal for me.
I bet it was. So you went there, and then it was when you left Mount Gambier and came to university that things unravelled again, wasn't it? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I had another hospital admission at the start of year 12 when I came back from Japan, and then got through year 12, and then moved to Adelaide for university, and lived at a residential college, and relapsed again quite badly at that point. And I kind of, by that stage, it had been 6 years of my life, and I was very, very fed up with trying to recover and not being able to, or seeming like, I was never going to be able to recover. And so I sort of said to myself, I'll give recovery one more shot. We'll see how it goes. Because I tried, outpatient, psychologist, dietitian, psychiatrist, hospitalisation, a range of different medications, and none of it had any lasting effect. And so I sort of said, all right, well, let's see how it goes. I'll try one more time, and then if it doesn't work, then I give myself complete permission to just fall 100% back into it. And I'd know that, I would have. I don't think I would have made it. I would have died eventually. So I kind of gave it one more shot, and it stuck, luckily.
I don't think it was luck. I think it's perseverance and true grit that you showed throughout all of this. You mentioned that, you probably would have died. Do you think you came close during some of these really, really dark times. How low did you go?
Yeah, I was pretty I think looking back on it now, as an adult, I find the whole thing terrifying because, and I can't imagine what it was like for my parents or my family watching me sort of disappear. But at the time you feel invincible. And, one of the things that one of the first things that any sort of medical professional says to you is that, if you keep doing this, you're at risk of this, 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 and this. Your heart's going to give up, your potassium level is going to go out of whack, you're going to get osteoporosis, all this stuff. And at the time, it's not like if those scary side effects were enough to stop people, then they would stop, and I would have stopped. But it's not enough because you feel invincible, and you have, I had Rex in my head saying, "You're not going to, that stuff's not going to happen to you." And these people are just saying that because they want to make you fat. They don't, don't trust them, don't listen to them. They just want to make you fat. So, it was pretty, I just can't imagine what watching that was like.
You're a passionate ambassador for the Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation. You've lived this, I guess, nightmare of a journey. How valuable is it, though, for you to be able to teach others about eating disorders?
Oh, it's an absolute dream come true. It kind of, it makes, I always thought to myself, even, when I was very unwell, I thought to myself, if me going through this, can educate or help, one other person, then it sounds really cliche, then it would, then I was thinking it would be worth it. But the stuff that I get to do with Breakthrough is I get to educate, whole rooms full of people about eating disorders and my experience, which is just, an incredible opportunity.
What kind of things are you saying to them that you think are making a difference to them?
I think it's being able to tell my story. I think being able to tell my story from a place of complete recovery, complete health, and sustained recovery for over 10 years now. And also, I think I've had feedback that the way that I describe Rex, and in particular the picture that I drew of Rex, and one time I was in hospital, and telling my story, with diary excerpts and things like that is quite powerful, in just giving people an idea of what it's like and how, eating disorders are not diets, they're not a lifestyle choice. It's not just because you want to look, a certain way or look like someone you've seen in a magazine, that it's, they are really sort of severe psychological illnesses.
What did Rex look like in that picture that you drew?
It kind of looks like a savoury shape, like like a savoury shape. It's black and red. He's got a very angry face, and sort of spindly arms and legs. And he's just there were lots of words around him, the sort of words that he embodied for me, I guess, like fear and failure and guilt and horrible and fat and worthless. Pretty horrible stuff.
Pretty horrible stuff when you're a 12-year-old girl. And then 14, 16, 18, 20. Incredible story. How important do you think research is in, being able to help other people with these eating disorders?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because it's how we learn, more about what's underpinning them, where they come from, pinpointing people who may be predisposed to eating disorders is a huge thing. And it would have meant that, if my family or if my school or, someone had been told, hey, there's a chance that that Elise might, go on to develop this, it would have meant probably that that initial doctor's appointment wouldn't have been so laid back, perhaps. It might have meant, treatment sooner. So I think it's incredibly important.
Breakthrough's doing some incredible work around eating disorders. Do you feel like there is more hope for the future for young women going through this?
Yeah, definitely. I think even in the time that I've been, involved in the eating disorder world, our knowledge for therapies and treatments that work and that are evidence-based has grown so much, to the point now where, I was going through this and 15 years ago was when I first started getting treatment, and the treatment now looks quite vastly different for someone of my age who is going through that now. And I think that's incredible. That's an incredible change. I think something else that has been really important in South Australia especially is the development of the statewide eating disorder service as well, because previously there was really nothing. There was bits and pieces everywhere. And I think I count myself as really, really lucky, because I had a really, amazingly supportive, loving family who were willing to do anything that they could to help me and to make sure that I got all the help that I needed, and there were no sort of barriers to me getting treatment. I'm always so grateful to my family, to my poor parents, who went through this pretty horrible experience. But I think that I'm lucky.
They must be incredibly proud of you.
I think so.
Elise Thompson, thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us as we share these extremely personal and important stories. If you would like to donate to Breakthrough Mental Health Research Foundation, please visit breakthroughfoundation.org.au. If anything spoken about in today's episode has been distressing for you, please contact Mental Health Emergency on 131465. We will have other resources in our show notes. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jess Adamson, and let's all tackle mental health head on.